Perfect. So here we go. It's part of the group stages. This is game 1, best of 3. We're playing on Mediterranean. Szalami won as the Rus, spawning in the north. And who do we have on the east?
In the east, in the color red, playing as the English, it's AltCtrl.
Now, how much do you know of AltCtrl? I saw that he's won a decent amount of games as far as MetaPlay's tournament goes. Don't see him much on ladder, though.
No, he... Honestly, I have a vague memory of him being cast a couple times on a few different YouTube channels. But you're right, we don't see too much of him in the big kind of mainstream scene. But I don't think that detracts at all from his skill. I definitely think he's a player to be reckoned with.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, just because you're not as well known as some of these big streamers like Szalami does not mean that you are not here to play. Looking at Szalami here on the Rus, obviously as Mediterranean, you're going to be more of a wood-heavy start, and Szalami going for some of these straggler trees here. But with Rus on water, especially against English, what do you think about this matchup?
I honestly think this is a little bit... I don't know. Rus used to be so strong, right? But there's a weird part of me that honestly wants to favor the English just a little bit here, because their spawn is really close together, right? This is not a cross spawn by any means, and the English have Dark Age men-at-arms. And we've seen how strong Dark and Feudal Age men-at-arms can be and how tough they are to deal with for other civs. So I honestly think that the English are a little bit favored right here, because they can do exactly what they're doing right now. Immediately spawn men-at-arms and just start causing problems. Like, they can get involved on the water. They have the Admiralty tech that gives them extra range if they really want to. But if they want to just ignore it and go for a full land rush, they're kind of in a prime position to do that, especially with the spawn that we have right here.
Yeah, and you see AltCtrl, we panned forward when we were doing our introductions, and Barracks was already going up, knowing that the Vanguard men-at-arms were going to be the first things to pop out and start torching this dock. One of the nice things about Rus, though, although obviously it takes a dock to spawn your fishing ships don't need to go back to the dock. They just magically teleport their fish back, as you see that nice plus 40 just hit right there. So although he's not going to be able to make any ships out of this dock when the dock is completed, at least he's still going to have a little bit of a food economy, which is nice for the civ he's playing.
And it kind of seems like Szalami is just resigning himself to defeat just a little bit here, recognizing that you're right, you can still fish with the ships that he's created so far, but recognizing that he probably won't be able to make too many more after that's done, because he's not throwing down a barracks to try and stop this from happening. He's just going to let this dock burn down, and maybe his plan is to go up to Feudal and turn some of these into attack ships, and then he'll be able to kind of defend an area with a dock a little bit without having to slow himself down and build a barracks. That could be his plan at this point, but it looks like he's only going to get out 3 fishing ships before this dock burns down.
Yeah, only 3, and he pulled a villager for that sneaky dock here on the west side. The sad thing is for him is AltCtrl's scout is already trying to take some small shots at the villager, letting him bleed just a little bit. Vanguard men-at-arms are going to be able to know what the scout is doing and run over here as soon as that dock is destroyed in the north. So Szalami trying to get cheeky with this dock, but if he doesn't get to Feudal soon and make some kind of units to stabilize this dock, it's going to burn just like the first one.
Yeah, and he's already got the men-at-arms headed over there. They're almost there. Torches in hand. The villager's going to go down, so that's a tough early villager loss for the Rus as well. Now, they are in the villager lead at the moment because they haven't gone for such an early men-at-arm rush. But that said, they do have, and they also have a couple extra fishing boats. But that said, this dock is not going to pay itself off. I don't think even a single ship will get out of this thing before it burns down. Maybe one gets out, but yeah, I don't think this dock is going to pay for itself. And I guess Szalami's plan is to just play whack-a-mole and throw up docks as fast as AltCtrl can burn them down. He sends 3 vills right out to the location of the first dock and just throws up another one. He's also on his way up.
Yeah, and he's going up with the Kremlin, a rather memey landmark. More so maybe just because maybe the Kremlin's not that bad, but just the Golden Gate is that good. for the Rus, but if nobody remembers what the Kremlin does, because I haven't seen this probably since 2021, it's the Kremlin acts as a wooden fortress, comes with arrow slits, castle turret, castle watch, so his wood's going to be a little bit protected, and because it acts like a wooden fortress, it's going to add a little extra wood economy to him to hopefully kind of stabilize some kind of water presence, but those Vanguard men-at-arms are going to try to stop him.
And that's I honestly can see the thought process to go with the Kremlin here, because the English player has made it very clear that they're going for a man-at-arm rush. So what is the Golden Gate going to do for you in the very short term that you really need to worry about? Not a lot. The Golden Gate is great to get extra town centers up and to get yourself established in the late game. But if what you're trying to do is survive an early game man-at-arm rush, the Kremlin suits you better because it defends your villagers and it gets you more wood. So you can throw down more docks, so you can throw down more fishing ships, and so you can build more outposts or wooden fortresses if you need them. So that all, it just kind of synergizes with the short-term goal of what Szalami's trying to do here. I think it honestly is a better choice for him.
And with that Kremlin, I know you were talking about short-term, but in the very short term, it's Kremlin 2, men-at-arms 0, as it took down a couple of those men-at-arms. Szalami going for a stable, going to make some early knights, and it looks like AltCtrl going up with the Council Hall. I really like AltCtrl's spot right now because of how he was able to disrupt this navy from the Rus, but the issue is for him, hasn't made any kind of dock for himself on the backside, so even though he destroyed a couple docks, he still has an uncontested food economy in the middle of the Mediterranean there.
Yeah, and this is going to, in the long term, put AltCtrl behind. He's made himself in a required position to do damage here. And he's going to do the best that he can, and honestly, if the Kremlin hadn't gone up for Szalami, he would have been in a lot more trouble because this wood eco could have been indefinitely idled. The stable has only just produced its first unit. The first military unit in the game has only come out just now at 7 minutes for Szalami. So without the Kremlin, AltCtrl would actually have idled this wood and be in a lot better position, but he needs to continue to do damage or else he will be outstripped by these docks producing essentially uncontested free town centers is what they are at this point.
Right. You're exactly right. And now that he's added a second dock here on the north side of the Mediterranean, this wood economy, now with how many villagers he has on it, they are idled right now, but we'll see when they go back to wood. It looks like about 13, and we'll be able to pump fishing boats out of all of them. These Kremlin arrows, look at how quickly those men-at-arms actually go down. Castle turret working out in a big way.
Yeah, it's a very good defensive structure in the early game. I think I think you were right and just spot on in what you said earlier in the game, as we do see this knight going to clean up a couple of these men-at-arms, maybe trade quite efficiently there with them. But it's not that the Kremlin was bad or has ever been bad. It's that the Golden Gate has been so good. It was like, why would you build anything else? But in a situation like this one where, you really need that defense and you were pretty much naked without it, I think it can be and is a really good landmark.
And the way, I think there's a good niche in what maps we're seeing it on. Having this in Mediterranean for a wood economy, that makes a lot of sense. Having it in a map like Boulder Bay probably makes a lot of sense when you're trying to get a navy going. But you're right, the Golden Gate is just so good. You get 50 resources for free every minute. For somebody who struggles with macro like me, you just get your macro instantly repaired. Like, it's just, there's nothing better.
So, with the Kremlin thrown up, I feel like AltCtrl has put himself, well, he hasn't put himself, but Szalami has put him in a tough position. His plan was to early game raid with lots of men-at-arms and longbowmen. That's pretty much shut down by the construction of the Kremlin, because everything that Szalami is currently gathering is in range of the Kremlin. He can't raid villagers anymore. I think his best bet at this point is to go back to burning down docks, because those are completely defenseless at the time being.
Well, it would have been nice for AltCtrl, and yes, this takes a lot of food to get those men-at-arms to burn down the docks, but you gotta dock behind it. If you're not gonna get that kind of, the reason why you're burning down docks, yes, you're slowing down their food economy, but you're making sure you have water superiority throughout the duration of the game. Because he decided to ignore it and not throw docks down after Szalami's were burned, Szalami just ended up making more docks and then just resumed like nothing even happened. And we're seeing how that didn't happen because the High Trade House is coming up for Szalami at the 10-minute mark, whereas AltCtrl is nowhere near Castle Age at this point.
Yeah, this is a semi-fast castle here for Szalami, and you know, not to harp on it too much, but this is also kind of facilitated by that Kremlin. When you don't have to build any military units, or hardly any, I think he's made 2 knights, all of your resources can go straight into fast castling, and you have a defensive structure in your second age landmark that can keep you from losing before you get up to the castle age. So I think the Rus playstyle, you know, we're used to seeing them go Golden Gate, get up several TCs, and go for that late game, but playing off of the Kremlin here and going for a fast castle is a really interesting and cool new style of play that I really am enjoying seeing out from Szalami. And in this match in particular, I think it's working out a treat for him. Now throwing down immediately 3 barracks, going to be getting out all the military units he needs, and he can start building warrior monks, taking sacred sites, pulling in relics, all the good stuff you want to do in Castle Age, because he's up there way before his opponent.
Yeah, and the best thing that Szalami is doing in Castle Age, knowing that the Rus do get their men-at-arms in Castle Age, they're rather normal men-at-arms, but the English doesn't have a lot of resources to combat a Castle Age men-at-arms because their Feudal Age men-at-arms are weak in comparison to them. But you're exactly right, the Kremlin, we just saw 8 of them get garrisoned in for wood resources. For AltCtrl and his English Feudal Rush here, he doesn't have much in the way of things to raid. I mean, a lot of the hunting cabins, he's getting passive gold. The High Trade House is getting 180 gold. And a lot of his food economy is in the water that he doesn't have a navy for anyway. So he's trying to raid resources, but he's not going to be able to find any.
Yeah, and AltCtrl is really doubling down on this Feudal Age raiding and harassment right now. He's not attempting to get up to a higher age in any sort of quick time. He's starting to get a little bit of gold and food stockpiled, but it's going to be a while before he's up. And even after he's up, if he wants his man-at-arms to be able to stand up to those of the Rus, he's going to need Chad armor. He's going to need the upgrades, you know, the higher tier upgrade to get him up to elite man-at-arms, because they just come that way if you're the Rus. You know, blacksmith upgrades, all of this stuff he's going to be behind, and that's when he makes it up, and he's still a ways away from that. So Szalami is running this game right now.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I don't know, I haven't kept the tally on how many units that Kremlin has killed, but I know it's Kremlin a lot and English 0. So
yeah.
as we're updating the score here, but if we want to take a look at these men-at-arms, the difference, I mean, AltCtrl having 120 health on these men-at-arms, 3 of the melee and ranged armor variety, and 10 attack. And you see these men-at-arms are just a strict upgrade towards that, to the point where the 5th barracks for Szalami is coming down, doing very good Rus versus English-like play when English is the Feudal Age, and just spam as many as you can because your food's basically free because of the boats, and your gold is basically free because of the hunting cabins.
Exactly, and on top of that, man-at-arms are perfect for the Rus, because what are the English going to build in the Feudal Age? They're going to build man-at-arms, and they're going to build longbowmen. Those are the only 2 things you hardly ever see the English build. Occasionally you'll see some horsemen, but even horsemen won't trade well into these man-at-arms. The man-at-arms from the Rus counter every single thing that the English can build right now. So you build them essentially for free, and they're just kind of an automatic I win button in this situation for the Rus. And now he sends them forward. There's a bit of a skirmish at the front of AltCtrl's base, and he's looking to return some of that pressure that the English has been placing on him all game. And look how quickly they clean up those longbowmen once they get on top of them. That's, you know, the men-at-arms might be a little bit slow, but once they get on top of you, ooh, you're in for a world of hurt, boy.
And you know, just because they're not a big DPS unit, they're more of a tanky unit, it's not necessarily about killing villagers, it's just idling them. AltCtrl is 15 idle right now. It's resources that he can't gather. Men-at-arms for the Rus have increased range armor, so those longbowman arrows are doing exactly 1 damage because they don't have the range damage upgrade. And the town center is also doing very minimal to these men-at-arms. So they basically have free reign around English's base, making AltCtrl do something about it, and English just doesn't have the technology in Feudal Age to do something about it.
And right as AltCtrl gets the first set of man-at-arms cleaned up, another 6 arrive fresh from the barracks back home. And look at it, they're arriving in waves, just like, here comes some more. You can scroll up the side of the map and just see them arriving. Every 30 seconds or so, another 6 of them arrive from the latest batch. That's just coming out in waves like this is Age of Empires 3 and we have batch training.
Yeah, really. They look like they're each little squadron coming in here. And for how many there are, I mean, there's only 5 or 6, but you can put them at all of these random points. As we see on the map, they're raiding the farm economy here. On the left side, there's wood economy getting hit. Gold, they're pretty much dead too. And now AltCtrl is dead pretty much entirely. as the win goes, the Szalami taps out.
Early GG coming out here. Szalami masterfully played, recognizing what his opponent was trying to do and asking himself, how can I counter that completely? Not going for too much extra greed, using what he has to keep himself alive in the short term, recognizing that the English was going to be behind, especially as he refused to dock in the early game. Very well played from Szalami.
Yeah, I think that early dock was, or not early docking, is pretty important. I mean, on a Mediterranean, when you have a map that's 40% water, you can't ignore it. You got to do something about it.
Absolutely. You can even see the economy count as it starts to get further and further out of control. If you look at that graph, the rate of increase for AltCtrl is completely linear because he has one town center and he's producing out of it, aside from a couple times when he loses a couple villagers. But the docks over time will outstrip you, and that's why it's so important to get those docks up, because you can't compete. And if you want, you can try and play fully land, throw down a couple town centers of your own. That's a way you can counter docks without playing on water if you really want to. But you can't play one base against somebody who is playing docks and get away with it for very long.
Right. Because there's a reason I know people say in AoE 4 how much water is, it's broken, it's overpowered, and blah, blah, blah. But you got to think about why. Making those fishing boats means the villagers that you make out of your town center can be spent using, essentially in feudal age, the other two resources of wood and gold. Stone, if you're probably not going to make a second town center if you're making docks. So having that allocation of different villagers on the wood, plus with the buff of the Kremlin, and then gold if you wanted to make knights, if you wanted to make men-at-arms and all that kind of stuff, which he was able to translate well in Castle Age. I just feel like this was textbook Rus versus English. If anybody's a Rus player and playing against English, you should probably watch this game over again. Yeah,
watch this one. Give yourself a big refresher on the timings, the scouting. This was a masterclass from Szalami, and it was a real treat to see. I'm excited to see where the rest of this series goes.
Go ahead and shift this over. We have Szalami spawning as the Malians on the western side. And Voiceless One, who do we have in the east?
In the east, in the red, on the Ottomans, it's AltCtrl. Now let's talk a little bit about this matchup before the game really gets underway, because a month ago, this was a slam dunk for the Ottomans. They win this 10 times out of 10. But as of recently, and pioneered by this particular player we have over here in blue, I might add, the Malians have come up with a devious little strategy, and they've really started to find their place in the meta. And like I said, it's kind of Szalami that pioneered that just a little bit. I mean, I'm sure he's played with a lot of other people, and they've helped him refine his strategy, but he's the guy who we really saw bring this to the forefront of playing the Malians, getting out those cows, establishing trade when you need to, and just zerging those Farimba Palace guys at your enemy. Usually Donzos, and sometimes also Musafati warriors.
And I remember a month ago watching Szalami in one of the AoE monthly tournaments that we have, using this strategy, and it was the first time I ever saw it. And I was like, oh my god, the Farimba garrison? Like, I thought that was a dance craze sweeping the nation. I had no idea what was going on with that landmark. But watching them spam the Musafatis out, and having that boost as soon as they hit Castle Age, it just reminds me of a better Burgrave Palace.
Yeah, right? It's very similar to the Burgrave Palace as it launched. For those who have a very long memory and have been with us for a long time, the Burgrave Palace used to do batch of 5 training, just like the Musafati does now. Or not Musafati, the Farimba garrison. So it's very similar in that way. Another thing to point out just really quickly is that we are here on Gorge. I love this map. It is so good. I'll talk for an hour about how much I love Gorge, but that's not the point here. My point about mentioning the map is that we do not have trade posts on Gorge. This is a Road to Red Bull Wololo map. And that means trade is off the menu for Szalami. And that is one of the Malians' biggest strengths. And it's not their only strength, but it is one of their biggest. So he will not be able to rely on that as the game goes on to get himself that huge chunk of gold.
That's actually a fantastic point. Because a lot of the pro players that I see playing Malians, yes, they do the fast castle, but then they're transitioning into an Imperial, post-Imperial trade late game with the Malians, and now Szalami doesn't have the ability to do that on Gorge. So if he's going to go fast castle, which it looks like he is with the Saharan Trade Network over here, he's going to put himself on a clock a little bit. If he's not able to get a lot of damage, a lot of Vil kills, a lot of constraint on the Ottomans in that early to mid Castle Age period for him, it might spell trouble, as the Ottomans do, like you said before, have a good matchup against the Malians in terms of win rate on paper.
The tides are changing, though. We actually had to see the Malians nerfed in the server-side patch we had just a couple days ago, which, okay, first of all, I love server-side patches. I'm so glad they came out, because we used to get cadence for patches so much slower. The Malians would have been, in a much stronger state in this game, or in this whole tournament, than they would have if we didn't have server-side patches, because they can just bring out quick little fixes. But one of the things we saw in that server-side patch was the Malians getting a nerf. Their cows now do cost 75 to build rather than, 90 rather than 75. So an increase of 15 gold, but still cheaper than they were. So that is an interesting change that we got to see. And then the pit mine has also been buffed up recently, so it's just a little bit stronger.
Yeah, did you think, just in your personal opinion, did you think the change to cattle was the change that you would have went with necessarily, or would you have picked something else in terms of nerfing them?
I really don't know. So I don't know how good cattle are. I haven't seen enough Mali played where they just go full cattle, where I really felt like they needed a nerf that badly. But the devs see a lot more than I do, so I actually trust in the nerf with this one, because if cattle were really that strong, then I do think that's a good nerf, because they did need a buff from 100 gold. I remember them being 100 gold first felt too expensive. 75 feels too cheap. So I think 90 is a good middle place for them to sit in for the time being. And it also, another thing that really helps is that you can no longer do the hamburger feeding thing, where you feed your cows to your, in a 2v2 game, to your friend with a Burgrave Palace, and they just spam out all the infantry they need, because allies gather rate on cows has been drastically reduced. So I think that was an excellent change as well, because that strategy had basically taken over all 2v2s.
Yeah, you can't, as the Malians, you can't do your best McDonald's impression, I guess, right? And send the beef over. But for this on a 1v1 setting, I think the big issue that I have with Malians when it comes to Fast Castle is the counterplay aspect to it. Having the Saharan trade network, having a 5,000 health outpost that can garrison 10 to the only thing that you can provide counterplay to, because remember, these sheep, and when he puts the mill down, those cattle right next to the town center, easily garrisoning your villagers, it's very difficult for you to stop what the Malians are doing in terms of getting up to castle, even if you know it's going to happen, and that's a bad feeling.
It is a little bit, but there's a couple things that the Ottomans can do. For one, they can take out this other pit mine. There is a second pit mine that has gone down here, and there is lots of juicy, weak little buildings that you can burn down over there and take out that second pit mine. And for two, the Ottomans don't mind this going to late game. The Malians are not the Chinese. If they make it to Imp, they're not going to roll over you. So there's no clock on the Ottomans that they have to end this right this instant. They can also choose to play defensive, hold up against the Farimba garrison rush that is almost certainly coming in Castle Age, and the Ottomans do really well in Imp. So if you want to play this to late game, that is more than acceptable. So you don't have to necessarily stop them from getting up to Castle if you don't want to, as the Ottomans.
Yeah, no, you bring up a good point. The longer this game goes, for AltCtrl and the Ottoman, I think just the fact that, like we said before, having no trading posts, neutral trading posts, means it's going to go in AltCtrl's favor. And he went a little bit delayed in terms of military aggression, as we saw his military schools didn't come out until later in the feudal age. Maybe his first one went down about a minute and a half ago. And he was more concerned with his food economy, his wood and gold, before getting stone, and also not going second town center, which I see a lot of people do against the Malian Castle Age. Do you like his strategy going forward?
I kind of do, actually, because like I was just saying, he's not putting himself on a mandate that he has to go up against the Malians in Castle Age. A lot of people will be like, I have to shut this down before the Farimba garrison comes out and steamrolls me. I like the decision to say I can play this a little slower. I don't need to stop this. If I just hold through Castle Age and make it to Imp, I am playing the better Civ. So I would like to see him throw down extra town centers before too long. He is currently taking stone, so that is current. You know, it'll be here before too long. I like that play. Because that will allow you to outstrip the Malians in gaining more eco as the late game goes on. But you don't force yourself to play into the Malian strength. You can kind of ignore it and play into your own strength later in the game.
And I'm curious to see if the late game actually becomes a factor, as the Farimba garrison does come up at about the 8:30 mark, and the first thing that Szalami is going for is javelin throwers. Do you like the javelin thrower play instead of the Musafati warriors that we usually see?
I do like the javelin thrower play in theory. The reason I say in theory is because you see Sipahi right now in your base. If you're scouting, I'm not entirely sure whether he's seen them, but I think Szalami has seen at least one of these stables as well. So you know that there are several Sipahi out now, more coming later. And that is a direct hard counter to your javelin throwers. So, I mean, we know that if you get up to the critical mass of being able to one-shot your horsemen, javelin throwers can be really strong. But if AltCtrl chooses to commit with these Sipahi before that critical mass is reached, this is an easy cleanup for all of these Sipahi.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and I think Szalami noticed that because he changed after his first javelin thrower mass of 5, he changed into Donzos. Which is going to help him. A lot of the things for the Malians is they have a lot of very hard counters. They're more of the extremists in terms of the rock, paper, scissors that we see, where if you pick paper, you're going to get cut pretty easily by the scissors.
Very much so. And, you know, they counter... You're absolutely right there. I've never really thought about it that way before, but that's exactly how the Malians work. Their counters are harder than any other counters in the game. So if you choose correctly, you win very easily. But if you choose incorrectly and your opponent plays mind games with you, you can find yourself in trouble. Which is why we see this wall up coming here. Not often that we see the Malians who want to be the aggressors early on play so defensively, but these Sipahi are fast. And the raiding has begun. Going to be losing a couple villagers already. Nice raid coming in here. The walls had not been completed on the left side. And this is kind of what AltCtrl needed. Like we were saying, that the Zerging is how the Malians want to play things. If you force them to play defensive, they're not getting anything done with their Farimba garrison. And that is exactly where AltCtrl wants to be right now. Also following up his opponent to the Castle Age with the Istanbul Imperial Palace. Not the MIA. Remember that. Interesting to note.
Yeah, rather different. I do want to see this fight, though. The Sipahi are going to end up, most of them getting taken down or at low health. The Metter still over here banging away at his drums. I want to zoom in on him just a little bit so everybody can hear the sound of those bongos as it tragically leaves this world. But yeah, the Istanbul Imperial Palace, if we want to take a look at this really quickly, doubles the Imperial Council experience around the landmark and increases the Vizier point limit by 2. I'm actually very surprised he didn't go with MIA, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I am too. Those free siege units are really tough to ignore, but maybe feeling like he wants a strategy that he can use more of the Vizier points. Remember, you will get 2 extra. You cap at 5 if you don't have the Istanbul Imperial Palace. So you get up to 7 with this, and you gain them faster. So maybe a specific Vizier point or a couple of them that are really interesting that AltCtrl needs in order to facilitate a strategy of his. I'm not super sure, but we'll have to see how it ends up playing out. The Sim City for AltCtrl also looking very nice here. Got everything nice and cozy around that blacksmith, just like it should be, and it's well done.
Yeah, and he's going for both barracks and stable. Looks like he's going to transition to knights, which might help him out in the Castle Age. But here we go with Zerg being Zerg with a military count 28-15 in favor of Szalami. He's going to start taking it to the Ottomans now. He stayed defensive, made sure his economy was okay, and now he's going to be able to pump out of that quote-unquote Burgrave as much as he can.
Yeah, the restraint there from Szalami was very good. He made sure that his base was defended. He wasn't going to be raided and backdoored once he set out. Now that he's done that, the Zerging has begun. He sets out all of his troops. They're grouped up in one little mass. And honestly, the way you look at this, it really makes you question the choice not to go for the MIA, because think how effective a single mangonel would be against these clumped up javelin throwers right now. That could be deadly. But that's not going to be the choice for the time being. In fact, we don't even have a siege workshop on the field right now. So a lot of these villagers going to be dying and driven away from their food source, putting the Malians ahead in the eco count right now.
But AltCtrl is coming back in the way of military count, and I do agree with you with the MIA. The mangonel is probably one of the worst things that a Malian could see. So that's usually what I would do as a counter, but instead we have no siege in this battle. A little skirmish in the middle of the gorge here. Janissaries trying to get some action here, but with no cavalry. I think they're trying to take down some of these Donzos, but the Sipahi and the Knights are actually getting a decent amount of damage here.
Yeah, this is honestly not the worst trade that AltCtrl could have taken. He's going to drive the Malians away from his base and get himself the space to put up this outpost that he's throwing up right outside the Twin Minaret Madrasa. Now, he loses a lot of his military, but the space he buys to get this outpost up is going to be pretty invaluable, because these Malian units are not tough, right? The Musafati warrior do not come with any ranged armor the same way that men-at-arms do, and neither do javelin throwers do. But they don't do any damage against the outpost. So they're, as soon as you throw some villagers in it, there's nothing for them to shoot at. So this is going to provide a nice defensive foothold for AltCtrl to get a further lead. So while that fight wasn't the best trade he could have taken, I think it stabilizes him in a way that he really needed.
And what a nice thing for the Ottomans is, because of this battle, was a lot of those units ended up being free because of the military school. So in terms of actual resource loss, not too much. And we see him trying to get these deer patches at the north and south, so he's spreading out a little bit with his economy. With someone as zergy as the Malians, though, they're going to see it, as we have veteran Musafatis and javelin throwers seeing these villagers trying to take the deer up north, and that's going to be a lot of dead villagers.
Oh, yeah. Gonna lose, I think, all of them? Oh, maybe a couple of them get away, as they're fast enough, but the javelin throwers can't keep up. But yeah, losing more than you'd like to. And, the Ottomans really struggling because of a lack of walls here. Now, it's tough to wall on Gorge. I'm honestly impressed that Szalami managed to do it. He had a really good spawn for it, but it also cost him a lot of wood. You can see that there's not a lot of tree patches for him to use in terms of walling. As we see a fight, hang on, there's a fight breaking up here over towards the Malian base. A lot of units going to be cleaned up by these knights that have come out here. The hard counter to everything that the Malians have built so far, and especially these javelin throwers, they absolutely melt tonight. So an excellent tech switch coming out here from AltCtrl, going to make sure he gets a favorable trade and further stabilizes, despite the fact that he has lost a few more villagers than I think he would have liked to so far.
Whoa, we have a mass conversion.
Is it going to go off?
Oh, no. He pulled the bait Wololo. He baited the caster into seeing some of those down south, and then up north. Took 11 villagers instantly with an outpost. And look at that economic swing. Szalami with the lead of 60 to 32. Insane.
That's when you suddenly steal 11 of your opponent's hard-built villagers and use them for yourself. Oh my goodness, that is insane. We call Szalami the Wololo Master for a reason, and he shows up and proves it right here. That was an incredible masterstroke of play, stealing all of his opponent's villagers. And the great thing about this is he hardly even cares if these die. They're not his. He didn't pay for them.
That's exactly right. He doesn't care. I mean, now there's probably about 5 left, and 5 of them are in a toll outpost. Those outposts are just going to be annoying more than anything else. It looks like those Malian villagers, they're going towards the Ottoman villagers. They're like, no, we're sorry. We want to convert back, but they're going to end up getting slaughtered.
Right? I mean, you'd like to save these if you could, get them back to your base and use them, but do you really care if you don't? And it's so tilting having all of his villagers stolen and being raided that while I think there maybe was still a chance for AltCtrl to make something happen, he's so far behind in the eco that he throws in the towel, and we're going to see a second game go over to Szalami. What a play. Aussie Drongo is somewhere screaming in the distance right now.
if you if everybody's just quiet, you could hear shouts from Australia.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so obviously, I mean, you can see just based on the villager count, we could take a look at the economy count too. A little bit of a drop off from AltCtrl, but I don't blame him one bit for what he did, because I think if that happened to me, and this was a ladder game, I probably would have left and, I don't know, did chores instead. I probably would have quit this game altogether.
That's just hurts. Like, that's both mentally, physically, soul. It just drains you. Like, oh, I feel so bad for AltCtrl right now. And now you lose this this set as well. And it's not just that you drop the game, you drop the set that way, and now you just have to try and shake it off and move forward after that happens to you. That hurts.
And even, like, I get that, okay, yes, you converted 11 villagers, that's kind of a big deal. But think about it on the backside, because AltCtrl was actually winning fights in those little skirmishes that we saw around his base, and he was doing a good job holding his own. He used all the APM for those villagers, he sent a lot of his units back. Szalami was able to get a Musafati mass out of that Farimba garrison to establish a good front line for him, and then that ended up winning him the game. So I get it that there's 11 villagers that went from red to blue, and we're all very excited. But think about what happened in the context of the other things that were going on in the game that made such an impact because of that also.
Yeah, there was just a very well played set from Szalami in across both the civilizations that he played, really controlling both of the games, recognizing the power spike on both the civilizations that he was using at the time, and just being able to facilitate early wins, really. I mean, those did not go to late game, either one, because he recognized what his win condition was, he set himself up for it, and he just made it happen.
Yeah, and a little bit of foreshadowing, too. We said that, the longer this game goes, the better it is for AltCtrl. Szalami didn't let him.
Exactly.
We want to thank our MetaPlace website subscribers. Your contribution helps us keep the project sustainable. As we reach higher subscription goals, you are helping us cover more and more behind-the-scenes costs, such as video editing. Check out our subscription page using the link in the description, and remember to collect your perks. We will see you the next time.